All right, good evening and welcome to this Tuesday, December 7th, 2021 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, moving into roll call. Commissioner Bowie.
Present.
Commissioner Ingert.
Present.
Commissioner Faulkner.
Present.
Vice Chair Fizer.
Present.
Commissioner Manser.
Present.
Secretary Peterman.
Present.
Commissioner Urquilla.
Present.
Mayor Turnbow.
Present. And
Chairman Wiggins is here. We have no personal appearances scheduled for this evening, so we'll move into our consent agenda, which is the approval of minutes from the November 16th, 2021 meeting. I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item or any discussion of the matter.
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir, Mr. Faulkner.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Faulkner, second by Commissioner Bowie to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All in favor? Passes unanimously, 9-0. Thank you. We have no unfinished business this evening, so we will move into our new business. We have two cases this evening. Our first case being case 21041, the Brown Event Center Conditional Use Permit. This item does require a public hearing, which I will open at this time and ask the applicant to please come forward to present your case.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Stephen Brown Jr., representing the Brown family at the location of 16119 Kentucky Road, Belton, Missouri. We are trying to open up an event center or event space. It's right now at a location where it's a barn and it's on 5 acres. Our proposal is to have in a new road that would give access from the Kentucky Road that would lead all the way to the barn and have plenty of parking space laid out for it and have the surrounding area of the barn with concrete, excuse me, with concrete. And then we would have a set of trailers on both sides of the barn that we wanted to install right next to it. Those trailers would serve as housing quarters or staying quarters rather for if we were to have like a wedding, his and her, and then in between those would be a spot for a kitchen and storage facility. And on the other side, or the east side of the barn, would serve as the spot where we have the main bathrooms, depending on occupancy level. And then we'd also have handicap parking nearby the barn as well. And our plan is to have the operating times start between 5 o'clock p.m. Monday through Thursday, run no later than 10. And then Friday through Saturday, have it run from 6 a.m. to 12 a.m. 6 a.m. meaning we would be there and the lights would be on and we would get things set up for any set event. And Sunday, 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., shut it down a little bit earlier. As we know, a lot of people have to go to work on Monday. With that being said, that's kind of the gist of what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you, sir. Any members of the commission have any questions at this time for the applicant? If not, I will turn it over to staff for staff report, and we'll let you know.
Chairman and Commissioners, again, conditional use permit has been proposed for Brown Event Space located at 16119 Kentucky Road. Surrounding uses are all residential, north, south, and west. West is going to be the city limits of the city of Belton, and to the east is a school with a PUD, Creekmore essentially for residential. The tract size is approximately 9 acres. A future land use map contained in the growth management plan identifies this area as appropriate for low density residential. The major thoroughfare plan classifies Kentucky Road as a minor arterial. This was a public hearing and so therefore was advertised in the paper on November 18th. I'd like to enter into the record a list of exhibits 1 through 7, and that's mailed notices to the adjoining property owners, Notice of publication, Unified Development Code, the application, growth management plan, and the staff report, along with the site plan. As the applicant had mentioned, this is a event space that would house different events, whether that be a wedding or receptions or things of that nature. And they kind of want to start out small and look to grow depending upon the demand for this use. Previous actions on this property, the subject property was annexed into the city of Raymore with an A agriculture zoning designation. The single family was built in 1988. Two different barns were constructed, one in 89 and one in 95. The applicant's request for a CUP only applies to the property. That's the biggest thing tonight, is that ultimately, does this body want to see this use here? This is the first step in a longer process that essentially they would have to come back for a site plan for your consideration. And so then the applicant also would need to get permits through BP pipeline, as there is a pipeline that goes right through the northwest corner. And so depending upon the location of that access road, they might be into an easement. So that would be one thing that they would need to look into. Signage would also be required off of Kentucky Road, as there is already a residential driveway. And so we want to be able to differentiate between the private residence and the actual use itself to prevent confusion for patrons. Applicants already described the hours of operation. Fire had a comment of a knockbox being required, as they were still looking to kind of separate the property, the first 4 acres to the additional 5 in the back, and so therefore that would be open during use, but if there was an emergency, fire could gain access through that. There's also an additional access off of a shared easement to the south that fire could use if necessary. An on-site storage disposal system would be required for this. That was one of the big things, is that does not exist. However, the applicant did meet with staff to kind of go over this with the building official, and has agreed to meet all of our requirements in order to do so. The neighbor to the west did raise a concern about the potential access point there off of Kentucky Road. And so I was going back and forth with the applicant on different ways that they could help alleviate that issue. And so that would be figured out during the site plan process, along with any screening requirements. As that lot does have a lot of mature trees. Would definitely need to look into the screening and just make sure that this is not going to be an overburdensome use for surrounding uses. Staff submits their proposed findings of fact. And then all conditions have been met at this point. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission accept the staff proposed findings of fact and forward case 21041 Brown Event Space Conditional Use Permit with a recommendation for approval subject to the following conditions. That concludes staff report.
All right, thank you, sir. Any members of the commission have any questions of staff or the applicant at this time?
Got a quick one here.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Commissioner Bowie.
Just to remind us, and tonight we're just voting on conditional use, but just so we all are clear, what is the steps? Conditional use, and then?
And then you've got your site plan. So they would come back with full engineered plans that are going to show lighting, parking, the gamut, what they're going to be doing with the actual barn, how it's going to look, the layout, those types of things.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions at this time? If not, I would entertain a motion to...
Sir, it was a public
Oh,
hearing.
I'm sorry. I'm just jumping right along. Thank you, guys. Sorry, I'm going to get back to my proper page then, so I make sure I stay in the proper order. I apologize about that. All right, so yes, so this is a public hearing, so we do invite anybody from the public to please come to the podium. We ask that you keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Please state your name and address for the record. And if anybody has any comments that echo what somebody else has already presented, please just state kind of dittos as opposed to spending the time saying the same thing again. So I would ask anybody to please come forward to the podium. Please make sure the light is green. And
Be sure to open your public hearing officially.
I did at 7:02 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So please, yeah, anybody wants to come forward, please, at this time, do so.
Mason Banks. I'm a adjoining neighbor to the south of the Browns. So we do share driveway, share property boundary. They gave me a courtesy call, let me know this is something they were considering proposing. I thought about it a little bit, don't know much about the detail of what this entails or size or much more than what you guys have heard tonight. I run a minor livestock program with my agriculture program. So I've got a little bit of concern just adjoining property boundaries with things that I've been exposed to when I've attended parties or events at similar places. So in a residential area, obviously the lights and the noise and some of the things that come with some of these activities, I'd like to be reviewed carefully to make sure it doesn't overspill into either a livestock issue for me or a privacy issue for the adjoining houses. So the only other thing that sparks my concern is I've lived on Kentucky most of my life. We actually resided in the residence they have now. Kentucky road's always been a challenge, so I think some thorough evaluation of the road capacity, road condition, being able to handle more traffic than it already does needs to be carefully reviewed. It's not lit, there's no shoulders, and it's kind of become an overflow traffic way for any kind of rush hour issue. So whatever that's worth, I do think those are things that would take some careful consideration. But they're great people, so that's about all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Anybody else have any comments to make from the public? All right, if not, I will close the public hearing at this time.
I actually have a question of the applicant.
Please.
If Mr. Brown would like to come back to the microphone. So you explained the what. I'd kind of like to know the why.
One of the big reasons for why was we didn't really see a lot of event space here in Raymore Belton area that was open, and it just seemed like a really good opportunity for us to kind of do it now. Doing it with my siblings and my parents, wanted to do something together, also help out the community. I teach martial arts, so I want to help the community out any way I really can, and I know having a space or a spot that is open to the public would be better for us to kind of help out through that avenue. All of us do martial arts, but outside of that, just gauging a few different friends or groups of friends rather on how they dream about having a wedding in a barn type of scenery, or having a spot we can all meet up that's over 100 people to gather. Those were the kind of things that sparked the idea for us that we could potentially do something this big.
Have you spoken with South Metro? Has the fire department been engaged at all in their opinion?
I had the initial meeting. The fire department came in and gave us a list of specs and things we would have to adhere by in order to have the facility open and pass inspection.
And occupancy limits and things like that, given the size of the facility?
A rough estimate of the occupancy limit was discussed, but nothing was set in stone or said that it is this said number.
Well, I think it would be if they knew the square footage of the facility, but I don't know what your intentions are for improvement. And judging by the photo or the picture, the drawing, it doesn't really give us an indication of what your final perspective would be on that. I realize we're looking at just the special use permit tonight, but it's hard to envision something off of a drawing like that might warrant more consideration for a special use permit. I'm just having a little difficulty picturing it.
Yeah, so the square footage is 2,400 square foot for the barn, and we planned on getting 12 by 40 for the right side of the barn, or east side of the barn, rather, and serve that as the bathrooms. And on the other side, we would have another 12 by 40, and then two 20 by 8 by 20, excuse me, to serve as the staying quarters and the kitchen. And the kitchen would be the bigger one, the 40 by 12, and also have a spot for storage. But the plan was to create on both sides, like a hallway that connect directly to the barn, and the trailers would be able to be switched out without compromising the structure of the barn at all. And so after 10, 15 years, if we needed to replace the trailers or update them, we could do that pretty easily. So it would be a little bit bigger space-wise. The intent is to keep the core 2,400 open to do whatever event would call for it. So we didn't want to take away from the 2,400 square foot.
Did you check with the Chamber of Commerce to see if they had any input about inquiries for event spaces in the area, but were limited?
No, I did not check with the Chamber of Commerce.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
Commissioner Kia?
I did want to kind of piggyback on that. I was going to ask, you mentioned wanting to create an event space. Has there been, other than your friends, any type of like market study to see what the demand would look like for this type of space? Do you plan on using it, I noticed, during the week in the evenings for a few hours? Is that going to be because you're going to do martial arts in the barn? Or is it purely for events only? Or what is it,
Wanted to use as a combination. So like Monday through Thursday, the martial arts or birthday parties or something small on the smaller scale during the week, and then bigger events like weddings or graduation parties, that sort of nature on the weekends, where you can have a longer period of time to stay there, enjoy the facility.
Secretary Peterman?
So your temporary trailers are going to be permanent? I mean, are they going to be attached to the barn, or is it going to be two separate trailers? And
Yeah, so we wanted to essentially put built-in hallways on both sides of the barn so that the trailers weren't directly attached to it. I mean, we would have it to where you could open the door and go right into the trailers. But if we ever needed to change out those said trailers, we could switch them out with a new one without compromising the structure to the barn itself. So the only thing we would have to reseal would be the hallways leading to the trailers being swapped out.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Faulkner?
Yeah. So I think I'd like to direct my question first to staff. Looking at a satellite view of that area, and I don't believe this was actually in our packet. I don't think it went out that far, but there are what appear to me to be commercial uses directly east of the Brown property, over just very close to the school, and also a little bit northeast. And I'm speculating because the aerial view shows what appear to be trailers or whatever on both of those properties, and they're separate driveways. Do we know what other uses are there besides pure residential?
I know that I believe it's to the north and to the south that are agricultural uses, farming. I would defer to the applicant, as I think that they are aware of maybe something else to the east.
I believe you're referring to company Casey Gunite, Mr.
okay.
Banks
Okay.
owns, right behind where the resident.
And that would be a shared driveway with your
Right now, yes, it's a shared shared road.
with your existing drive.
Yes.
Okay. Do you happen to know anything about there's a long driveway. It's a gated property at Kentucky, and then several buildings and things further to the north of your property line?
That's up north.
There's a fairly good-sized pond up there.
Yes, that is also Mr. Banks's parents' residence.
Oh, okay.
Further down, yes.
So it may be the same, may be all part of the same enterprise?
Yeah.
Is that, well, up to you.
Yeah, I mean,
Since we closed public hearing.
well, with it, I mean,
Okay, if you wouldn't mind, just so that we can hear you,
just so you can put it in the microphone, just so it can be recorded.
I appreciate it.
No, you're good.
Neighbor to the north is Randy Phillips. He's got a 20-acre tract. Bulk of it's agriculture. He runs livestock. He's got horses there now, and he's got a small construction company that backs up to my folks that live directly east of him. They're on about 15 acres. Randy and I are boundary neighbors on half of his south side. So,
And I actually lived in Bel-Ray backing up to Kentucky Road starting in 1978, 15 years. So I lived down the street from all this, but of course I never actually got off of Kentucky to go exploring. Those buildings back further east from Kentucky have been there for quite some time, haven't they?
yeah, we have got quite a collection of buildings.
Okay,
From 85 on,
Okay.
buildings have been built or added on to.
I didn't think it was anything new, but I also didn't know any of the details, but I definitely have seen the KC Gunite sign out there on Kentucky, so I appreciate the information. Thank you.
Mr. Zur, I saw you gathering attention.
And I don't want to distract the commission from the questions they've got. Based upon some of the comments and questions from commission so far, I did want to point out that we are here for a conditional use permit. The code does allow additional conditions that could be applied that would be appropriate in order to help make sure that it is not negatively impacting upon neighboring property owners. One in potential may well be the conditional use be allowed for a period of time, be renewable after that time frame. That would allow for an opportunity to have individuals come in and say, hey, we've either had no problems at all whatsoever with regard to the use, we've been satisfied and the trees have now grown so we have screening, or alternatively we've run into issues and hear what the issues are that may need to be addressed for any continuation of that conditional use. So I throw that out there, not necessarily directing the commission for it, but making sure that you all understand that you have some discretion here with regard to the conditions that are applied.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Manser.
Yeah, I had a couple of things. Mr. Zur kind of stole my thunder on the screening. Do you plan on creating a screen to address Mr. Banks' concern of headlights invading privacy or anything like that?
Not to interrupt, I imagine this is maybe where Mr. Zur is going to go. That would be part of site plan as opposed to impacting, I mean, the conditional use would be whether or not the facility could be used for such an event or for such a purpose as opposed to what screening, egress, ingress, et cetera would be. That would be more site plan. So
then could I address maybe parking lot size if there was a study done on that?
Sure. I would defer to Mr. Zur ultimately. I mean, obviously that would be things that,
So
I would.
they will have to comply with all of the provisions for the construction on the site pursuant to the terms of the site plan that would get submitted. I anticipate you would see a considerably more detailed engineered site plan when that comes before you all. And again, I'd welcome planning staff to be able to provide any additional input on where they are with that, or if there are limitations, limited numbers of parking spaces that they are aware of. But yeah, I would view that as very much a site plan oriented question.
Okay, great.
And I'll throw in there that looking at it on just your map, you can see trees kind of already line the property. So.
Any additional questions for the applicant while he's at the podium, or for city staff?
We did have.
Or any comments from?
So I just wanted to get back to Mr. Mayor's question on just kind of the meeting with fire and the building official. So that magic number is 300 occupants, where that starts triggering special, whether they need to have sprinklers and those types of things, but that occupancy load's going to also depend upon the size of the building that's allowed, the use of it. I mean, there's a lot that goes into the calculation, and until we know what they're proposing, that it's hard to narrow it down to an exact how many occupants are allowed in that space.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, sir. Any additional questions from members of the commission? Okay, and I did close the public hearing, I believe, previously, so now would be the appropriate time for me to ask for a motion to dispose of this item.
Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Kiko.
Yeah, I'd like to propose that we accept the staff proposed findings of fact and forward case number 21041, the Brown Event Special Condition Use Permit, to the City Council with a recommendation for approval subject to the 5 conditions outlined on page 9 of our packet.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Kia, second by Commissioner Bowie. Any discussion of the motion?
Yes.
Sure.
I would like to discuss the length. Mr. Zur, you brought up the special use amount of time. Is that something that we can incorporate in these conditions to pass on to the City Council?
Absolutely. If you were inclined to do so, you could motion to amend the proposed motion that's before you at this time by adding a 6th condition. That 6th condition would have reference for allowing for that conditional use to operate for a set number of years and then be renewable based upon reapplication if you were inclined to do that. Worked with that in the past, a number of municipalities regarding gun ranges and similar activities that might have loud noise associated with it.
Could I ask you for a recommended amount of time that is typically done there, or could I ask staff to provide their input?
I'd probably open that up to staff. I have worked with things in the past that have been 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, but I want staff to be able to have their input on that one as well.
I would also echo what he said there. So from other communities that I've worked with, I've seen 10 is probably the max, but I mean, if you were so inclined, I would say 5 years is probably around the medium.
Okay. So
And- Can I ask a question on that real quick, too?
Yes, sir.
If I may. So, and I just lost my train of thought, but with the time limit, can we do that later, or do we have to do that now?
I would assume it would be part of the conditional use permit, but
It would be approved as part of the conditional use permit when the council approves it. So you're setting that as an additional potential condition to be enforced from the time that it is. So if you're saying, hey, I think it might take a year for them to get up to speed and operating, the notion there would be make it 6 years instead of 5 years type of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, but where I was going with that is until we know what the final product looks like, to then determine what the time frame should be with that, we'd have to kind of go with it now? Okay, that's what I needed to know.
But the other thing is, if I may,
please.
the other thing is that the council could come back and
Accept
not-
or reject it, yeah.
accept or decline that
That condition,
sixth condition.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
or alter it.
okay.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on if it kind of needed to happen right at this moment. In my mind, I was like, oh, we can see what it looks like, and then we can figure out. But to your point, no, we need to do that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, right
That's
now,
for sure.
the seeing what it looks like is going to be tough for you because really all you're focusing on is this an appropriate use at the site given what's surrounding that site?
Sure,
And the potential condition for the time frame is an attempt from what you are able to do at this point to kind of protect the surrounding neighbors for, okay, what's this look like in the future?
Gotcha.
Mr. Zur, a question. So in talking again about adding a 6th condition time limit, would it be permissible for commission to phrase that condition to say 5 years from site plan approval, for instance, or something instead of triggering now, something that would delay? And I heard Commissioner Kia suggest 6 years, which would be an extra year to get things under operation. I think I'd be okay with 6 years. I was just wondering if there was another way to trigger the clock.
The UDC doesn't specifically identify any manner of when that restriction is allowed or not allowed. It simply indicates that in approving a conditional use, the city council may impose conditions, safeguards, and restrictions upon the applicant and the premises that will benefit from the conditional use as may be necessary. The city council may limit the conditional use permit to a specific time period, allow the conditional use permit to be transferable, or allow the conditional use permit to be renewed. So in this particular case, you'd be looking at having it be a specific time period and open for renewal at that point.
Right. My thought was, obviously, city council can change whatever the commission suggests. I just thought, it behooves commission to make the best suggestion we can, whether it's strictly time limit or triggered on site plan approval or some other date down the road. Just a thought.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Mr. Urquilla?
So that would lead me to ask a question of the applicants, that if we put a time restriction on this, would that impact their decision to move forward or not? Because I would assume that, I don't know what time frame they would need to make this profitable, if they've looked at that yet. I don't know if the applicant wants to talk to that, if you're okay with the time restriction, or if that would
Mr. Zer may have
impact your
tackled that.
decision.
Commissioner Urquilla, I did actually inquire of the applicant and the family with regard to the time limit. I did not specifically identify a particular time limit with them, but basically outlining this is what would happen under the terms of it. So if there is a time frame that the commission is interested in, obviously we can have the applicant address that time frame. I suspect if you told him 6 months, he's not going to be very happy with that. If you told him 6 years, he's going to be considerably happier, but maybe not as happy as 10. So I think that'd be appropriate for the applicant to provide input on.
Okay. So did you want to throw out a specific time frame, or did?
Well, I would ask maybe Mr. Manser, since he's the one providing the additional one. Because I don't know what you had in mind, and you'd be the one that was presenting the sixth condition, so therefore I would like you to.
I'd like to inquire with the applicant.
By all means.
Yes, the 5 or 6 years would definitely be okay with this.
Perfect. Okay. Commissioner Bowie, did you have another question, or was that? Nope. Okay. Any additional questions regarding Mr. Manser's? Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, which I think is your mic on, sir.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask staff, at what point, or is there a point that this changes from a special use permit to an actual occupational license or business license? Is there a turning point on this? Because if he's going to open a martial arts studio and then have events in the evening, at what point is it considered a business rather than a hobby?
Very, very good question. The conditional use permit is for an event center. We don't, under the conditions, I don't think we're limiting what type of events there would be.
Right.
Or how often an event can be repeated on that. My initial reaction would be holding a class within the facility would be an allowable event that could be repeated. So the event center will have to have an occupational license. They would receive that license after they go through, if they get site plan approval and use approval and all the permitting approvals, then they would be able to secure a occupational license as the event center. And then they would just have to meet the conditions, hours of operation for classes, but they could do the wedding events, they could do the martial art classes. They could do it as long as they meet the requirements of the time frame.
Okay.
So, and the only license would again be for the event center, not necessarily for the classes being held there.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to add a sixth condition, putting a 6-year time period on the conditional use permit with the opportunity to renew after that.
Good. Is there a second to that one?
Second.
Okay. So the initial motion on the floor is motion by Commissioner Kia, second by Commissioner Bowie, to accept staff findings of fact and forward the case 21041 to the Brown Event Space Conditional Use Permit to the City Council with a recommendation of approval to the 5 conditions. And we have an amendment to the initial approval by Commissioner Manser, seconded by Vice Chair Fizer, to add a sixth condition, to add a 6-year time period of the conditional use permit with the opportunity to renew.
And that would, I want to make sure and be clear for our record, that 6 years would start from the issuance of the conditional use permit. Is that my understanding?
Correct.
And you have then a motion to amend the underlying motion that would need to have any discussion and vote on that.
Very good. Any motion or any discussion on the amended motion? Okay, so we have a motion, an amended motion. Everything good
Voting on the amendment. We're not voting on the whole thing. We're just voting on the amendment.
On the amendment
We
first.
need to vote on
Okay.
the amendment.
Thank you for that additional. So on the amendment of the 6th item, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? And abstentions. Passes 8-1. And now for the original motion, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously 9-0. Thank you all, and thank you for your diligence. All right, so we will then move along to our next case, which is case 21042, the Watermark Apartment Community Site Plan. Do we have a presentation from the applicant or city staff first?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It will be from the applicant first. He does have a presentation that I would like take a moment, actually broadcast to your workstations, and then I will free up your computer so you can get back to your packet.
Very good, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Chairman Wiggins and commissioners, thank you for your time tonight. It's a privilege to be here to come before you. My name is Jake Ross. I'm the development manager for a company called Thompson Thrift Residential, previously known as Watermark. Quick point of clarification, we recently went through a name change for our company. We have a retail group and a construction group, all of which are named Thompson Thrift. We felt like it was time to name our multifamily division Thompson Thrift as well for uniform branding. Just wanted to get that out there, so you may have heard this project and this company referred to as Watermark. Quick point of clarification there. So I'm here before you tonight seeking approval for a site plan for a residential community that consists of 300 dwelling units. There are 9 buildings contemplated for this site that are residential apartment buildings. Additionally, there would be a fitness center, a leasing center, and a clubhouse that would be used by residents. To start off with just a couple key facts about the site. So the site is located to the east of Dean Avenue, just to the south of a commercial user at the property to the north. To the east of the property, there's a single-family home neighborhood. To the south, there is an undeveloped parcel that may perhaps become single-family at some point in time. And then, of course, Dean Avenue to the west. The site is 16.5 acres approximately. As it relates to parking, we envision 1.94 spaces per dwelling unit. A key metric there as well that I think is worth mentioning, we have a ratio that's also stalls to bedroom, not just stalls to unit. And the reason we do that is across all your 1-bedroom units, 2-bedroom units, and 3-bedroom units, we like to make sure that every bedroom has a space for a vehicle. And so our ratio there is 1.0 stalls per bedroom. We really probably only need about 0.9, but we like to have that buffer to make sure all our residents and all their guests have more than enough parking. So a couple of key things to point out about the site as well. Bear with me just for a second. Yeah, having a little, if you want to go down to 19. Oh, here we go.
Spoiler alert.
Thank you. Can everybody see the site plan? So to start off, want to mention one of the goals we had for this site was create a nice buffer that's nice and wide to the west of our site there to create a sort of sense of privacy between our residential buildings there towards the east end of the site and the neighbors there to the east. And so we located our detention pond there. And another thing to mention about that is the backside of that is envisioned to have landscaping as well. We don't want that to be just a raw, boring detention pond. We want that to feel special and further create that buffer and sense of privacy and enjoyment for the neighbors to the east there, as well as our residents. We want our residents to come home and feel like they have a place that is theirs. Another thing that's worth mentioning here is we've heard from residents and staff and the community that the trail system here is very important. And so we've agreed to provide a trailhead towards the west end of our site there. And so that trailhead has 14 spaces where anyone from the public can come and park their vehicle, hop out and go ahead and this taps into that trail network. And so we want that to be something we're providing to the community that can be used by anybody. So that's another big part of the site that we care about. If you look at the northwest corner of the site there, as you're driving down Dean Avenue, we understand that that's going to be your first vantage point towards our site. And so we really cared about really activating that corner and making it feel special and presentable as sort of our best foot forward. And so you'll see there we have, and the line work might not be super clear on this drawing, but what we're envisioning there, that is where our leasing center will be, our clubhouse, and our fitness center. And then probably more importantly, the outdoor deck space where we'll have a pool with a little water feature, cabanas, grilling stations, lounge seating, really activating that corner and making it something that is special, both for our residents, but also something that's sightly and compelling for the community. And so that's also where our primary access is, off of Dean Avenue there, towards the north. So you really come in there and you have parking available for people who are considering leasing, where they can meet with our on-site property management staff. As you move into the site then, you get into more of the residential part of the site where the buildings are. We're contemplating a dog park in the sort of center of the site there. This doesn't have a laser, does it, by any chance? But, okay, right. So what we do, we think that's one of the advantages actually of Thompson Thrift Residential is we have an in-house property management group, and they operate all of our properties that we own across the entire country. And what that allows us to do is really key into what residents enjoy and what they don't enjoy, and what seems to work and what doesn't. So one of the things that we picked up on is it's really important to have these dog parks. And what we'll do then is have a little structure there that's a maintenance building, but it can also be a dog wash, and then it's connected adjacent to that dog park there. So we chose that central location for it. And then as you move farther into the site, you'll see some detached parking garages. And then in the very center there, you have a cluster of residential buildings. And in the center of those is where we'll have more outdoor amenity space, really trying to drive that theme across this site, that this is going to be something that the community will really be proud of and the residents can really enjoy. So this plan actually doesn't show it, but if you look through the landscape plans that have been submitted, you'll see a programmed area there with lounge seating and a little lawn for throwing a Frisbee or whatever. To the south, we have parking stalls, and I might take this moment to address one of the comments we received from the neighbor to the south. We were really trying to respect and listen to the neighbors' concerns there. And one of the concerns was those parkers, as they park their cars facing that southern direction, if there were to be some sort of single-family home development there on the south end, they're concerned about vehicular lights. And so what we're seeing here is sort of a two-part equation. One is there's a big elevation change at the southern end of our site. And so, depending on the size and the height of a single-family home, it actually may not be an issue. In the event that that is a sticking point with neighbors and with the community, we're very happy to entertain, looking at another solution there, landscaping, something like that. But that's something maybe we can talk about. So that's really the overall gist of the site. I think those are the main points I wanted to talk about. The technical aspects of the site perhaps will come up as well. But this site, as I mentioned, has a detention pond on site, and that will collect stormwater and contain it and detain it temporarily and then reroute it. To the west end of the site there, I want to point out that there's an existing stream. And if you were to walk out there today, you actually may not see the stream because there's trees and there's tall grass there. And so something we're in the process of doing right now actually is figuring out exactly what the capacity and requirements are for that, because it actually is a detention, sort of detention area that services commercial users to the northwest of us. And so as we finalize what that area will look like, part of what we're going to try to do is clean that up. Again, that's sort of our front door, and so we want that to be visually compelling and something that we'd like to look into, making really clean and neat and organized. So that's really the gist of the site there. Again, thank you for your time, and happy to be here with you. Happy to respond to any questions as well.
Any members of the commission have questions for the applicant before we move to city staff report? Sure, Mr. Faulkner.
Yeah, just a quick one. Will any of these buildings have basements?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Quick question.
Yes, sir, Commissioner Bowie.
Your bay garages, and maybe I missed it, but the bay garages are garage doors that come down?
Yes.
And
Yep.
one trash enclosure in the bottom corner?
That's correct. Yep.
So that's going to be a pretty big area, 300 residents or 300 units, right? I mean,
Are you talking about the size of the trash enclosure?
size and plus the trash enclosure. If there's any new buildings or new single families that come to the south of the property, then your trash enclosure is going to be right facing their particular homes.
Yeah, I guess the way we would respond to that is, we've done a similar configuration in a lot of our properties, and one of the convenient aspects of that location is that it's less disruptive in a way, because the trash company can come straight in off that secondary access on Dean, not have to go through the site at all, except that bottom corridor there, access the trash and exit directly back out. And then to respond to your question directly about neighbors, we're pretty comfortable with the level of noise. We have placement similar to this on all of our other properties, essentially. And so I think we feel like we're confident in being able to maintain that. I think one other thing worth mentioning here is our on-site staff. We have like I said, in-house property management that operates our properties. It's not a third-party company, and we have on-site staff on all our properties, and so they're pretty well-trained at being able to make sure that there's no messy situation or weird things going on with trash. They have, very strict control over the site.
Oh, yeah, and it's probably a small thing, but if, I would love to see that trash corner be in the northeast corner of the site,
Okay.
as opposed to the southeast, where there's going to be potential homes built.
Gotcha. Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time from Commission? Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
So you mentioned the stream. You're doing some engineering work on that now. As I recall from our talks that I've been involved in with Watermark and staff, is that we've talked about that being a potential water feature. So I'm a little bit reticent to move forward without a little further explanation of what your intended use of that retention area is on the west side.
Sure, that's a great question, and I want to be careful in my response because part of this is, the engineering of the, making sure we're meeting the capacity that's required for those neighbors. And its existing state is a stream, so I want to be careful not to overpromise. But that is certainly something we can look into, depending on what ends up happening there and how much we can alter those streams. If that becomes a slightly larger body of water, we're happy to, create a water feature there, certainly.
Well, I mean, the stream is enclosed in that rectangle. You pretty much encircled it with concrete, so you've already altered any stream that might have run south from there. So I think what I was thinking of is your study will determine whether or not it can retain water on a regular basis, and if it can, you will or intend to make that a water feature?
Yeah, intend, I think, is the correct word there.
Okay. If it retains.
Stab at it.
Sorry, Andrew Gribble, the civil engineer of record on the project. So that detention basin collects all of the water from Sam's Club and Lowe's. It either goes to the east, which is behind the Sam's Club, or it goes down to that western part of our site. There is a pipe that comes in from the northwest, and then it actually goes into a pipe on the south, and then it discharges. So I don't think it's an actual stream at this point. It's just how the water has naturally flowed from the northwest to the southeast, from the inlet to the outlet. Yes, we do not have to touch that area, so that's why we are going to the east detention pond, but we are looking at if we can control that, and there's a lot of rock, so if we can put a clay liner down and detain water and make it some sort of water feature, that is what we're looking into. We just received the stormwater report the other day, so we're in the works of that. But at the natural state right now, it comes in, we are leaving that pipe alone, and then we are leaving the pipe alone, just putting a road over the top of the pipe to discharge out.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir, Commissioner Bowie.
I appreciated your explanation of the additional parking, because that was a question that popped in my mind immediately. If you only need a certain amount of parking, why are you adding so many more parking spaces? But you addressed that earlier. All your parking is, there's no uncovered parking?
So the majority of the parking on site is surface parking, not covered, and then there's a couple detached garages.
Okay. Okay.
Is that what you're asking?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
It's kind of hard to see, but you can, like where the areas that are garages, the grayed out space in between them, for instance, anything that's that kind of that speckled gray is a surface parking spot. Okay. Any other commission questions? Otherwise, I'll leave it to staff for their report. All right, staff, please. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir. Tonight we are talking about the Watermark project, which is located east of Dean Avenue, south of Office Max and Sam's Club. Existing zoning is R3B, Apartment Community Residential District. Surrounding uses are commercial retail to the north, undeveloped to the south, single-family to the east and multifamily to the west. The approximate size for the tract is 21.03 acres. As part of the future land use map and the growth management plan, this area is identified as appropriate for commercial development. Through our master thoroughfare plan contained in the growth management plan, Dean Avenue is classified as a minor arterial and Johnson Drive as a minor collector. This project did not require a public hearing for this. Previous actions on the property, it was rezoned from agriculture to C3 Regional Commercial District in March of 2005. The rezoning included areas such as Lowe's, Steak and Shake, Golden Corral, and Big Old Tires. The property to the south was rezoned from ag to R1P, single-family residential, in 2004. On August of 2021 of this year, City Council approved the rezoning for this property from C3 to R3B. And on November 22nd, there was an issue with the legal description, and where when it was rezoned, it didn't encompass the entire property, and so therefore the first reading was approved to encompass that entire area, which would have been the detention area. So that needed to be changed. Also, we have a attached memorandum from the engineering department for approval on this. We have the standard R3B lot sizes along with setbacks, and there are a list of special use conditions that go with this use. For the parking, the requirement on this would have been 450 spaces, and the applicant's gone up to 582, and obviously they went into great detail on to why they do that. They meet the 20% lot requirement for their landscape buffer, and the adjacent land to the north is zone C3, which it doesn't require any additional screenings. A type A landscape screening is required along the eastern and southern property lines. The submitted landscape plan utilizes tree and shrub plantings to provide a required type A screening. The required trees and shrubs in the parking lot and landscape islands are provided. Landscaping will need to be provided around the proposed monument sign as required, which is up on that northern access point. It's a little smaller, but on the south side of that. The buildings will be in compliance with section 440.010 as listed. Pedestrian access, all buildings within the site have been provided a sidewalk that can, essentially you can move about throughout the entire site no matter where you are. The fire district required a truck turning movement plan, which was submitted. With two means of access off of Dean, there was no additional emergency access. They would need to get an additional permit through South Metro if the site plan were to be approved. Stormwater runoff and quality will be handled by a combination of underground conduits and detention facilities in accordance with city code. Street lighting, they do meet code, and the property lot lighting poles will be 20 feet tall. The trash enclosure is very similar in nature to the actual proposed elevations, and so it'll almost look like the part of the building. They also have the standard screening for mechanical equipment. Site access to this, the subject property will have two access points off of Dean, one on the northwest corner and one to the south. The interior road within the site will provide adequate vehicular traffic flow for emergency vehicles and residents within the proposed development. A trailhead parking lot was discussed earlier, 13 spots along with 2 ADAs. Private amenities that will be included are a clubhouse, swim pool, a fitness center, dog park, a mailroom for package and delivery, secured garages, door side trash pickup, fire pit, benches, pergola, gas grill, seating areas. Those are all primarily on that northwest portion of the site, along with some common grounds within the middle of the site. Staff submits their proposed findings of fact. The proposed development meets or exceeds all requirements by city code. The applicant is required to submit their design and construction plans for all public infrastructure and for each building for the city staff to review. A final plat application will also need to be filed for consideration. That final plat would be inclusive of that trailhead, which would essentially donate to the city as part of that final plat. Staff recommends Planning Commission accept the proposed findings of fact and approve case 21042 Watermark Residential Apartments site plan, subject to the following 14 conditions. That concludes staff report.
Thank you, sir. Do any members of the commission have questions for city staff?
Quick question here.
Yes, sir.
Staff. Okay, this may be for the applicant, I guess, but
Either one.
trail parking. Okay, trail parking. Maintenance, on-site maintenance will be responsible for it, cleanup, trash, after hours, gate, in case people want to come there at midnight and 1 o'clock and park and drink. I'm just throwing it out there because that's a reality, and it sits right off Dean Avenue. And then, you get done shopping at Costco or Walmart, and you come right down there. Or you're 18 years old, you got a girlfriend. We all know the scenarios, right? So I'm saying,
I think fronting Dean Avenue might not be the best location for that,
but I guess that's just it's like however many parking spaces sitting off to the side. Sure. Has there been any concern or talk about that? Maybe that can be addressed to the applicant. I don't know.
So I think I can take this one with kind of that private feel that the applicant was describing. The two access points each have a gate, and so therefore staff felt it was necessary to, it's almost going to be like if a public feel. So anybody can pull into this area and they don't have to be a resident. And so therefore city taking that over to maintain it kind of made the most amount of sense. And after talking with other staff, that was the intention, is that it would be donated to the parks.
Would it be open 24 hours? Or when would the gate be closed? I mean,
I'm not sure on the gate. I would assume.
Well,
we'll defer to the applicant.
gate to the apartments would be further down the road, right. Not at the front, not on the Dean Avenue, right at Dean Avenue.
Right.
So if there was, to kind of piggyback on it, if there was an issue with loitering or whatever you would consider happening there, the city would be responsible, parks would be responsible for putting in a gate to close it off at night, like they do the other parks.
That's
would
correct.
essentially be what would happen down the road if there was cause for concern.
Same with trash. Will there be a trash receptacle there or no?
I would have to say that they would put one in. I mean,
okay.
Just knowing that there's that possibility.
Okay.
So.
That becomes an eyesore.
Sure.
It becomes a concern for,
It's right there off the Dean.
Yeah, residents will be calling, hey, there's somebody out there at 2 in the morning. Just something to think about. And being so close to probably the highest crime area in the city, which is near Walmart and so forth. Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong, former police chief, but
it has its issues. I wouldn't say it's the highest, but it's got its issues.
It's just some concerns that'll come up at some point, so just be ready for that as a city, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and being 15 feet off Dean Avenue is probably not the best place to be loitering with police hopefully drive by, but it's true. Any other commission questions or comments?
Well, just that it's all in likelihood it won't be theirs forever. It'll end up being a city-maintained piece of property at some point in the future. Yeah. Yep.
Yes, sir. Mr. Zur?
This may be a little out of character for me, but I'm curious. I wonder if I might be able to have the applicant come back up. I have questions with regard to the answer that was provided on that water feature in that area up there. I'm curious as to whether or not they can provide any additional detail. In recollection and talking, there has been more than a little bit of discussion about that as a water feature. I'm curious if they could provide details for the commission's consideration from an engineering standpoint as what would make that impossible or impractical perhaps to not be a water feature in the future.
Sure, that would be great. This is the first I've heard of it being referenced as a water feature, so at least, I don't know if the other commission members had heard that in the past or not, so that's news to at least 8 of us.
So we discussed this last at the neighborhood meeting, but it's really your first feature that you see coming in, and right now it is an eyesore. So we talked about making it some sort of water feature. In reality, there's rock right there, and we're gonna have to put some sort of clay liner down to keep the water there. Clay liner or a actual like fiber liner somehow. But in reality, it's if there's enough water coming in from, I mean, you're detaining all the water from, I guess, Sam's Club and Lowe's, but if it's a dry year, could it be dry? Yes. But if it's a wet year, will it hold water? Yes, it could. So it's a matter of just raising and lowering the inlet and outlet, and to hold the water in that area. Okay. Does that answer?
Yeah, so I was just curious about, I know that I'd been told that you were doing a study on it to see if it would retain water and how it could be retained.
Correct, and I haven't looked into it in depth, but yes, all of that water from the north drains right through there and then goes through that natural channel and then drains out. So that outlet, if we raise the structure before it overtops, would it hold water? Yes, but we have to make sure that it's not going to flood our site. Or
So you haven't done any soil sampling below the surface rocks to tell us whether or not it's an impermeable type material? Like we've got Johnston Lake's got rocks in the bottom of it too.
If it is, you can bring in some sort of liner, but then that costs additional money as well. So there's a feasibility part of it as well that we have to study and make sure that it's worth everyone's while to turn that into a big pond, besides just cleaning it up and letting the water drain from north to south.
If it's not a big, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, well, I just,
Yeah, I was gonna probably go the
I
direction.
guess my question would be, because this was the first I've ever heard of it, so as the site plan that I've received doesn't feature it, and I've never heard of anybody mentioning it, would that then become an issue of they'd have to come back if they decided to move forward with it to then update their site plan with that? Because and I by no means will speak to anybody, but the only people I've heard reference this before is the mayor and then Mr. Zur. In the initial presentation from the rezoning, no water feature, pond, anything with this section other than asking them to put in the trailhead had ever come into conversation. This site plan doesn't have it in part of conversation. So the site plan that's presented to us doesn't really, it doesn't address it, doesn't include it. Is that an issue? Because it's not even presented as such a thing. So are we talking about something that's not even ever been presented to 8 of the 9 body? Or, so I just want to, does it then become an issue if they do want to do it and they find it's something they can do? It hasn't been, that's what I'm trying to say is that they haven't said, hey, we're going to do this, and then they're going to come back in 3 months and say, oh, it's too expensive, we're not going to do it. And we're like, well, crap, that they didn't do it. Well, they never presented it as an actual part of their site plan to begin with.
Right, and I guess kind of veering off that, if you can't turn it into a water feature, what plans do you have for that area? Are you going to put up like a path around it to kind of extend the path? Are you going to landscape it? Or, I mean, because to your point, you even said that you think it's an eyesore. So if it can, water feature. If it can't, what's the plan?
Maintenance.
Yes, the plan there would be, as I mentioned, we want to make that our front door compelling. So we're certainly going to clean it up the best that we can. I know there's tall grass out there, there's trees. We're looking into exactly like what we can disrupt in that area that we're allowed to, but it's in our best interest for sure to make that as cleanly and sightly as possible.
So I guess my question then is if there are plans to do something other than what's presented at this moment, whether it's a path, whether it's a pond, whether it's a bunch of park benches, or they just are going to pave it with asphalt, I mean, does it then need to come back as an adjusted site plan? What would be the steps? Because like I said, what's presented here tonight is basically literally on page 41 of 63 of this PDF, literally an inlet drain that dumps it into a big white void and an outlet drain on the south end. And so there's nothing beyond that. So if anything, whether it's water feature, path, the world's largest inflatable, snowman, does any of that kind of stuff come back to us, or is it just kind of an amendment that the department takes care of? Is that within that your purview of, making amendments to a site plan without having to come back to commission?
Really would be a decision that should be made as part of our recommendation tonight, or decision tonight on the site plan. Typically, no, it would not come back to you. They would come in with their final, when they do their final construction plans, they will know exactly what's happening with the front pond.
We would just have to
Unless we add it as a specific condition,
yeah, as I said,
that
we'd
it
have to
does
make
need
it
to
a
come
specific
back
condition.
before, the final plan for the pond needs to come back before the planning commission. That would be an unusual step or an unusual condition, but you could do it. If it's of a high enough concern for you of what exactly is going to happen there, then you could add that as a specific condition before, for example, before we issue building permits, they have to come back and submit the plan for the pond area.
But we could also just make it a condition that they do something, correct?
Absolutely.
It doesn't
Make a
have to
reasonable
necessarily
condition.
come back to us, but we can just add a condition to the motion that states that they will do something, whether that is the water feature that they've discussed, if feasible, and if not, some other
Maintenance.
plan that they're gonna do to take care of that area.
You certainly could, yes.
Get some input there.
Yeah, if I may, so you guys own this piece of property, correct?
Correct,
So they own that piece of property, and it's all draining. Everything offsite is draining onto their property, so we don't want to make it worse. We want to make it better, if anything. So if it could be turned into a wet pond for us, that would be something that we'd look into. But correct me if I'm wrong, but we're going to make it look better no matter what.
Well, and I figured, so basically at that point, you guys wouldn't object to a condition that states that you're gonna do something to that area? Or would you?
I would ask if there's any way to make that a little more close-ended.
Yeah.
I think maybe a good word here is maintenance. Like, there's tall grass out there, there's brush, there's trees. Maintenance, I think, is an appropriate word. We'll go out there, make it look as beautiful as we can. I would be hesitant to, open this up to any sort of feature, without a little bit of a definition there. To answer your question, just being completely honest.
No, I understand. More than anything, I'm just trying to figure out what we can do to move this forward without having to say, hey, until you bring us something, we're going to hold off on approving your site plan.
Absolutely. Yeah, if it's okay with you guys, I think maintenance is something we'd happily agree to. But
I guess my only concern with that is, is maintenance brush hogging once a year, or is maintenance, having their lawn crew mow it every other week and it's fertilized and that's just the hard part, is it continues to be open-ended, but at the same time we don't want to bookend it to say that it'll be mowed every 2 weeks and blah blah blah, especially if it's scrub brush. But I don't know.
Well, I think they admitted they're looking into it. They're
Sure.
investigating the possibility of it retaining water. And
Right.
I think a condition could be that if it will retain water, then it will be a water feature.
Right. I think it's just the issue of if it can't retain water,
Then they will maintain it.
then they will agree to maintain it, but at the same time, if I would be concerned of, well, yeah, we'll take care of it, and it's like eventually like, well, we're going to skip it this month because there's no
Yeah, but-
maintenance agreement to it, but
And I get what-
that's getting into the weeds quite literally.
And I figure, to their point too, this is, the people who come in to rent this are going to see that area. They can't hide it unless they put up some sort of weird screen to hide it.
Sure.
So, I get your concern, but the flip side of that is if they're maintaining it, they're maintaining it.
Yeah.
And, it'd be to their own detriment not necessarily the city's detriment, because it's not like it looks that great
Right.
right now.
Put a couple green giant arborvitaes around it, and nobody will see it in about 3 years. It'll be hidden. All right. So with that, then, are there, obviously they've got some conversations going on. Are there any other questions for the applicant or city staff? Or any questions for, obviously, Mr. Zur, anything regarding?
Mr. Zur, are you in a position where you might be able to scribe a 15th condition with regard to the water retention?
I am not at this particular point as far as trying to impose that upon them. I think it may be appropriate for the applicant and their engineer maybe have a quick conversation as part of this discussion.
Well, I think he's asking if you can draft something if it is able to retain water, not necessarily require.
I think that at least in the quick conversation I had with the engineer, it was it would be a water feature unless it was economically infeasible or did not hold water, period. But I don't want to splurt that out without them having the opportunity to have a conversation on that topic first.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to spend anyone's money, so I was just trying to add something that's cost prohibitive, and it doesn't become too expensive to turn it into a water feature as well.
So if it can retain water, would it be?
If it's feasible and cost prohibitive.
Well, where I'm going with that though is let's say the basic kind of what you know, if it can retain water, would it be feasible without having to put a liner in or anything like that? So if you just went out there and said, yeah, this could hold water the way it is, would that be feasible?
It would be moving dirt, and I mean, I'm spending my client's money, but I don't want to answer for him, but that would entail just moving dirt. But then it could turn into having a wall or some sort of clay liner or an actual pond liner that could get very expensive.
Right, but at that point, you're saying that the land doesn't retain water on its own, and you're having to do something to it. So that would, in a sense, override the motion that says if it can retain water, you have to make it a water feature, because then you're saying it can't, and that's why you have to put the liner in. So you wouldn't have to put the liner in at that point, but you still could.
Correct.
Right? Am I right, Mr. Zer?
Yeah, if you have them put in a liner, it's going to cost them money in order to be able to do that.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is if the motion says if it's in its current state can retain water, they have to make it a water feature. We're not saying that they have to put a liner in. We're saying...
I think the notion would be, is it economically infeasible for them to put it in, and in what basis would that be? Again, that's something for them to have the conversation about, as to whether or not that, do you want to have that conversation at this point?
Yeah, and I understand what you're... I'm just saying if it, because you're saying to put the liner in, yeah, that could become economically unfeasible. But what I'm saying is if we say that if it can retain water in its current state, they have to make it a water feature. We're not adding... I mean, because then to that point, if it can't, then the liner is their choice, not a requirement on our part.
Fair statement.
And then applicant, would you be okay with us saying that if it can retain water in its current state, that you'll make it a water feature, and if not, you'll maintain it or do whatever you feel is best up to it, including maintaining it?
Yes.
Okay.
That's as close as we're going to get.
All right. So,
thank you.
Any other questions for either the applicant or city staff, or any more ways to address the now added water feature to?
It's not now added.
Sir, it is not in the plans as presented, and it has never come across these 8 people's desks.
I like that.
You're not the only ones working on this.
I know.
Chairman,
Sir.
I wonder if we might be able to take from legal's perspective, make a 5-minute recess for us to have an opportunity to talk with the applicant about a proposal.
Okay.
I would be okay with that. Does anybody else have any opposition? All right, so we will take a 5-minute recess. Let's go ahead and round it up to 8:20. We'll be back at 8:25. Okay. All right, we will resume this evening's meeting. I believe city staff will have something for us here in just a moment. All right. All right, Mr. Carteret, do we have,
We're
or Mr.
out of
Zerr?
recess. Coming out of recess, back on, are we up and running?
Yes.
Very good.
Sir,
Thank you, Mr.
Please.
Chairman. Staff has had discussions with the applicant's engineer. We would like to propose a condition to be added to the 14 that were recommended by staff. I believe it goes along with what was being discussed by the commission members before the break. Would propose the condition to read, if the West Detention Basin can economically be made capable of holding water, it will. If remaining as a detention basin, the basin shall be adequately landscaped and maintained comparable to the overall apartment community. If it is a detention basin, I think we have to realize that there will be occasions of water in the bottom of the pond, so it's not going to be manicured to that extent. But I think what's important about comparable to the overall apartment community is having the banks at the top of it landscaped and looking more like a feature. And then if it cannot, again, as the engineer was applicant's engineer was indicated, if it cannot be proven to hold water, again, in an economical fashion, there's some man-made ponds that simply, because of the rock structure underneath it, cannot hold water, or the economically viable could be, the cost of clay liner or lining it. It's just not feasible. So we're trying to get that balance. We want the engineer to come in and, in essence, prove up that, can it or can it not be made a wet basin, an actual feature. So believe the applicant was comfortable with the condition, staff's comfortable with the condition, so we would recommend that be added.
And I would
Could you
only,
read that again one more time, Jim? Could you read it again just one more time so we can?
Yes. If the West Detention Basin can economically be made capable of holding water, it will. If remaining as a detention basin, the basin shall be adequately landscaped and maintained comparable to the overall apartment community.
Thank you. I'm satisfied with that.
and I would simply have the applicant confirm that if they're willing to do so, either through their engineer or them.
for the record, absolutely.
Confirmed.
Thank you very much.
With that, Chairman, I'll go ahead and
Any final discussions since we have the 15th now?
I'll make the motion, and then we
it's
can still
true.
discuss. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Kia?
yeah, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we approve case number 21042, the Watermark Residential Apartment Site Plan, subject to the now 15 conditions outlined by city staff.
Second?
I have a motion by Commissioner Kia, second by Commissioner Manser. For rereading it all, any discussion on the motion? Very good. So the motion is to accept staff findings of fact and recommend approval of case 21042, the Watermark Residential Apartment Site Plan, subject to the 15 conditions that have been outlined tonight. Is that correct, Mr. Zerr? Is that adequate?
You are approving this evening. You are not making recommendation.
Yeah.
I apologize.
We're the
To
approval.
approve,
You're the approval. And I think that was what the original motion was for
Yeah,
approval. It was
was
not
to
for
to
recommendation.
approve the site
case.
plan
I read
and
it as it is in there.
Subject to the 15
Yeah.
conditions.
accept the staff proposed findings of fact and approve case. Yeah, I thought that I read it that way. I apologize. Okay. Any final discussion on the matter? All in favor? Passes unanimously 9-0. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for taking care of that. We'll move quickly along into our city council report for this evening. Mr. Zerr.
Thank you. Since the last meeting you all had, there's been one city council meeting where business was conducted. That was on November 22nd, 2021. During the course of that meeting, the two items of interest that the commission was involved in were before the council on first readings. The first one was the Lamora Estates lots 7 and 10 rezoning. There was a public hearing on that one. You would recall that on your November 16th, 2021 meeting, you approved that proposed rezoning by a vote of 9-0. This would alter those two particular lots from single-family residential plan district to the R2P single and two-family residential plan district. The only other item on the agenda that was discussed the evening, again also approved and forwarded for a second vote, was the 34th Amendment to the Unified Development Code. Public hearing was held on that matter. You all would recall again the November 16th, 2021 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, approving it via unanimous vote 9-0, and again the council approved that and forwarded it as well for a second reading. That would conclude my staff report or city council report from the November 22nd city council meeting.
All right, thank you. Do we have a staff report this evening?
Yes, sir. So we will be canceling the December 21st meeting as there are no items on the agenda at that point. And January 4th, we actually have nothing filed as of yet, so that could potentially be canceled as well, but we'll obviously be in close contact to let you all know. That concludes staff report.
Thank you. Do we have anything from Public Works or no? Okay. Now move to public comments. I do not see anybody from the public here, but if anybody would like to come forward and make any comments at this time, please do so. So I will then move along, seeing no one coming forward, to commission member comments. I'll start with Vice Chair Fizer, please.
Well, a good deal of our staff is gone, but I'd like to thank them for all of their work and helping us understand more and more about detention ponds. I'd also like to mention that the mayor's Christmas tree is at TV Hannah Station Park, and it's beautiful. You should go take a look at it if you haven't, and all of the trees by different businesses. If you look closely at the bottom of the Arts Commission tree, you will see a planning and zoning ornament, so go search for that. That's it.
Thank you.
Was that ornament approved by the commission?
Yeah, I don't know that it came across my desk. I didn't see any plans on that one. I think only one of the 9 of us got to hear about that feature.
Chair sure is sensitive about some things, isn't he?
Commissioner Faulkner.
I'd like to comment on how nice the lights here at City Hall and Centerview look. Very nicely done. I noticed that as I was driving over, and thanks to staff.
All right. Commissioner Ingert.
I'd also like to thank the staff, including Mr. Zur. Thank you very much for your legal advice. It comes in very handy in making the decisions here. And I'd also like to say happy holidays to everyone.
Secretary Peterman.
I'm good, nothing tonight.
Commissioner Kia.
Just, appreciate everything the city and the staff do for us in preparation and things like that. Enjoyed the discussion this evening. Want to wish everyone, safe and happy holidays, and look forward to seeing everyone in the new year. So, thank you.
Commissioner Manser.
First, I'd like to thank Mr. Zur and Chairman Wiggins for keeping me in line with my questions and whatnot. I'd like to thank the staff. You guys did a great job meeting with, the developer, and I think what we were looking for was a standard. And, without saying it, you guys figured out that's kind of what we needed and implemented. I think you guys did a great job with that. And I'd like to also, I know they're not here, but I'd like to applaud the Browns for coming to the city and to the commission with, a creative idea that wasn't, in a formal format. It shows some creativity and passion about what they're doing. I think it's great. Thanks.
Thanks, sir. Mayor Turnbow?
Yeah, I just want to thank staff again, and I thank the commission for their patience with me tonight and my pursuance of the last item on our agenda tonight. But we had, well, I won't get into it. Also, I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Won't see you till after the first of the year, possibly. So, everybody have a safe and happy holiday season. Thank you.
Commissioner Bowie?
We formally canceled the next meeting. Just want to make sure that that is on the record, because you mentioned it, but we didn't necessarily acknowledge that. But first, thank you to Commissioner Pfizer for always bringing the aesthetics of things that we need to be looking at around the city. Appreciate that. Thank you to staff for your hard work, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for staying with everything here tonight. Good discussions. I'd like to echo what Jeremy said about the Brown family. Like to see some new ideas and stuff. So I'll be interested to see how that comes along and comes to fruition. City staff, thank you for everything. As always, A, getting us ready for these meetings, and then B, making sure that any of the discussion topics that we touch on are appropriately addressed, and that we look at everything in the right way, so that way it's less likely to have some issue come back to us or to another department within the city in the future. So Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Other than that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
A second.
Motion by Commissioner Kia, second by Vice Chair Pfizer to adjourn. All in favor? Unanimous, 9-0. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Usually people jump on that second one.
I know.
Fast.
Tonight, everybody's been slow on the trigger on the second.